6 years ago, a man named Daniel Prescott sat across from me at a coffee shop in Portland and told me he had lost himself. He couldn't point to a single moment where it happened. There was no fight, no betrayal, no dramatic explosion, just a slow erosion. He said it felt like waking up one morning and realizing the person staring back in the mirror was carrying emotions that were never his to begin with. Anger he didn't understand, guilt he couldn't trace, a heaviness that clung to him after every conversation with certain people in his life. And when I asked him who those people were, he gave me a list of names: his brother, his closest friend, a woman he had loved for years. Every single one of them he described as kind, charming, generous even. That's the part nobody warns you about. The people capable of quietly dismantling your mind are rarely the ones who look dangerous. They smile, they show up to birthdays, they tell you they love you. And Carl Jung spent his entire life proving that the most destructive human beings on earth are not the obvious villains you were taught to fear. They are the ones who have never once looked at their own darkness. And when a person refuses to face what lives inside them, that darkness doesn't vanish. It goes looking for somewhere to live. It looks for a host. And more often than you'd ever want to believe, that host ends up being you. Today we are placing the stamp of psychological sovereignty on your mind. By the time this video ends, you will be able to name 6 specific types of people Jung warned us about, recognize them in your own life, and understand exactly how they slip past your defenses. Let me ask you something before we begin. How many times have you walked away from someone feeling drained, confused, somehow guilty for a crime you can't even name? Hold on to that feeling, because in the next 30 minutes, you're going to understand where it came from. And I promise you, by the end, you will never look at the people around you, or at yourself, the same way again. The unconscious manipulator. Let me take you back to Daniel for a moment. The first name on his list was his younger brother, Ethan. From the outside, Ethan was the sensitive one, the wounded artist, the kind of person who could make you feel like the only human in the room. But every conversation with him ended the same way. Daniel would leave feeling responsible for Ethan's sadness, his failures, his rage. If Ethan was angry, it was because Daniel had provoked him. If Ethan was miserable, it was because Daniel hadn't done enough. Slowly, Daniel started apologizing for things he never did. This is the unconscious manipulator, someone so blind to their own wounds that they hurl them onto everyone within reach, purely to survive. Jung put it in words that should make the hair on your arms stand up. He said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate. And sometimes that fate has a face, a name, and a seat at your dinner table." The unconscious manipulator lives in a state of constant projection. In his book, The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung wrote that projection creates a kind of psychic blindness, a prison where the other person stops being seen as who they truly are and becomes a symbol for everything hidden inside the manipulator. So when Ethan looked at his brother, he wasn't seeing Daniel at all. He was seeing a lost, rejected fragment of himself and punishing Daniel for it. Here is why these people are so hard to escape. They are often the most charming people you will ever meet. Charisma, sensitivity, an almost magnetic emotional intensity. And that magnetism sets the trap, because you start believing you can heal them, save them, understand them in a way nobody else ever has. So you pour yourself out. And the more you give, the deeper you sink. I want you to do something right now that will protect you for the rest of your life. Drop this affirmation in the comments and mean every word of it as you type. I refuse to carry emotions that were never mine, and I return every projection to its rightful owner. Write it down, because the unconscious manipulator doesn't break into your life through the front door. They walk in through the open gate of your empathy. The bearer of the mask. If this is landing with you, If something is starting to click, take 1 second and click the subscribe button. Thank you for being here. It genuinely means the world. Now, the second name on Daniel's list surprised me. It was a woman named Claire. And Claire was, by every measurable standard, perfect. The perfect smile, the perfect posture, the right thing to say in every situation. Daniel dated her for 2 years, and in all that time he told me he never once saw her cry. Not because she was strong, because there was nothing underneath the surface he was ever allowed to touch. This is the bearer of the mask, the persona. Jung taught that the persona is the social mask each of us wears to move through the world. On its own, that mask is healthy. We all need it. It lets us be a doctor, a teacher, a friend. In The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung defined it precisely. He said the persona is what someone is not, but what he himself and others think he is. The danger begins the moment a person forgets they're wearing it. When the mask fuses to the face and everything spontaneous, vulnerable, and real gets locked away in the basement of the soul. Think about it. Have you ever known someone who seemed flawless, and yet being around them left you feeling strangely hollow? That's the signature of the persona. Every interaction feels rehearsed, and worse, the bearer of the mask demands that you perform too. Show a real emotion, a doubt, a moment of pain, and watch them recoil, because your realness reminds them of everything they've buried. Nietzsche saw this coming more than a century ago when he warned, "He who fights with monsters should be careful, lest he thereby become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Live long enough beside a mask, and you'll start reaching for one of your own. You'll begin measuring your words, policing your face, hiding the parts of yourself that don't fit the script, and you won't even notice it happening. I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments right now, because saying it out loud breaks the spell. I release the need to perform for anyone, and I give myself full permission to be authentically and unapologetically real. That's your stamp against the mask. The owner of the repressed shadow. There was a name on Daniel's list he almost didn't mention: his father. A man everyone in town admired, disciplined, church every Sunday, never raised his voice. And then, roughly twice a year, something would rupture. A small thing, a misplaced set of keys, a joke that landed wrong, and the calm man would vanish, replaced by a fury nobody recognized. Then, minutes later, the mask of composure would slide back into place, as if nothing had happened. This is the owner of the repressed shadow. Someone who works so hard to appear light that the darkness eventually seizes control. Jung gave the shadow more of his attention than almost any other idea. In Ion, he wrote that the shadow is everything that the individual refuses to recognize in himself, and yet insists on manifesting in some way. The shadow isn't the evil of the world out there, it's internal. It's the resentment you won't admit to, the envy you rationalize away, the ambition you dress up as humility. And Jung's warning was blunt. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Here's what makes these people so disorienting. At first glance, they don't seem dangerous at all. They're admired, helpful, kind, but they cannot tolerate weakness in others. They're irritated by raw emotion. They seem permanently charged, coiled, and they never explode until they do. And when it finally comes, it's devastating. Jung was clear about the mechanism. The stronger the persona, the more repressed the shadow. And the more repressed the shadow, the more brutal its eventual eruption. Let me ask you something honest. Do you know someone who holds grudges for years, who detonates over nothing, who quietly sabotages the very relationships they claim to treasure? You're not looking at a bad person, you're looking at a person at war with a part of themselves they've refused to meet. and until they turn and face it, everyone around them will keep getting hit by the shrapnel. The moral controller. Halfway through our conversation, Daniel's voice changed. He told me about his aunt, Margaret. Margaret never yelled. Margaret never manipulated in any way you could put your finger on. Margaret simply made him feel, every single day, that he was falling short of some invisible standard of goodness. Every choice he made was quietly weighed and found wanting, and it was always delivered with a soft smile and the words, "I'm only saying this because I care about you." This is the moral controller, and Jung saw this archetype as one of the most insidious forms of psychic repression there is. The moral controller doesn't integrate their shadow. They project it, cloaked in righteousness, onto everyone around them, then condemn those people for the very things they can't accept in themselves. According to Jung, the greater the internal repression, the more violent the need to project the shadow outward. So the moral controller turns the people around them into sinners and deviants, all to avoid facing their own buried desires and contradictions. What makes them so much more toxic than an ordinary manipulator is this: they genuinely believe they're doing good. They think they're saving you, correcting you, guiding you toward the light. Their cruelty arrives wrapped in authority and false spirituality, in phrases like, "It's for your own good," and "someone has to tell you the truth." In Ion, Jung wrote extensively about the archetypes of Christ and the Antichrist as symbols of wholeness and dissociation. The moral controller believes with all their heart that they embody the light, while remaining completely blind to their own darkness. And that blindness is exactly what makes them dangerous. Machiavelli once wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. The moral controller is a trap dressed as virtue, and your defense is discernment. Live under someone like this long enough, and you'll start policing parts of yourself that were never wrong to begin with. Their morality quietly becomes your prison. So here's your stamp against that cage. Drop this affirmation in the comments where you can come back to it. I answer to my own conscience, and I refuse to let another person's shame decide my worth. Type it now. The complexed person. If everything you're hearing is resonating, I want to point you towards something that goes deeper. There's a growing library of these breakdowns waiting for you on this channel, and the next one continues exactly where this leaves off. But first, stay with me, because the fifth type is the one that keeps you hooked the longest and hurts the most on the way out. The next name Daniel gave me was the woman he had loved. Her name was Rebecca, and loving Rebecca, he said, was like living beside the ocean. Some days, warm and endless and beautiful beyond words. Other days, a storm that came from nowhere and nearly drowned him. A compliment would suddenly twist into an accusation. A gentle joke became an act of war. He never knew which Rebecca he was going to wake up next to, and so he learned to walk on eggshells across his own home. This is the complexed person, someone dominated by unconscious complexes. Jung defined complexes as autonomous nuclei of emotion and memory that live in the unconscious and can seize control of the conscious mind at any moment. They're like fragmented personalities inside us, forged by trauma, psychic wounds, and experiences we never fully processed. In psychological types, and again in the ego and the unconscious, Jung described how these complexes can hijack a person's behavior completely, causing them to react not to what's actually happening, but to an echo from the past. A single offhand comment connects, without warning, to an old abandonment, a rejection, a humiliation, and the people standing nearby pay the full price. The tragedy is that the complexed person has no idea it's happening. When Rebecca lashed out, she believed she was being perfectly rational. She wasn't. She was reliving something undigested and ancient, and because the eruptions come in unpredictable waves, broken up by moments of genuine warmth and real love, The bond becomes almost impossible to break. You keep telling yourself, she isn't always like this. Sometimes she's wonderful. And that flicker of wonderful is exactly what keeps you chained to the storm. Jung warned that unrecognized complexes end up colonizing the entire psyche. They speak for you, feel for you, act for you. And the danger for anyone caught in that orbit is that, slowly, you start to absorb the chaos. You begin doubting your own memory, your own feelings, your own grip on reality. Without ever realizing it, you're being colonized by someone else's unconscious. Think about it for a moment. Is there someone in your life who can embrace you in the morning and destroy you by nightfall, and seem genuinely bewildered by both? That's not a character flaw you can love out of them. That's a war being fought inside them, with you standing on the battlefield. The psychic vampire. There was one name left, and Daniel saved it for last, because it was the hardest to say. It was his closest friend of 20 years, a man named Thomas. Thomas never yelled, Thomas never accused, Thomas simply needed, endlessly. Every call, every visit, every message carried a quiet weight, a demand for attention, comfort, energy that never once flowed back the other way. Daniel described the feeling perfectly. He said, I would hang up the phone and feel like something had been drained out of me that I couldn't get back. This is the psychic vampire, the most silent and insidious drain of them all. Jung never used that exact phrase, but he described the mechanism precisely. It's the pathological symbiotic bond, the relationship that stops psychic growth and dissolves the boundaries of the self. Across the ego and the unconscious and ion, Jung named one of the gravest threats to individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, as exactly this kind of connection. Two people who no longer recognize themselves as separate human beings, but as psychic extensions of one another. The psychic vampire needs your constant attention and your endless availability. And behind all that neediness sits a void that isn't yours, and one you could never fill, no matter how much of yourself you throw into it. You start by offering support, then you give your time, then you tolerate things you never should have tolerated, all in the name of understanding, until you look up and realize you no longer know where they end, and you begin. The exhaustion runs deeper than the body. It's existential. And here's the cruelest turn of all. The moment you reach for space, the roles reverse. Suddenly, you're the selfish one, the cold one, the one who abandoned them. The victim becomes the accuser in the space of a single sentence. And before you understand what's happened, you're living your entire life just to keep them from collapsing. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said it plainly 2,000 years ago. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. Your energy is not an infinite resource for someone who refuses to grow. Protecting it is not cruelty, it is survival. The mirror at the end. So Daniel finished his list, 6 names. His brother, the manipulator; Claire, the mask; his father, the shadow; his aunt, the moral controller; Rebecca, the complex storm; Thomas, the vampire. And then he went quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked, and he asked me the only question that actually mattered. He said, "But what if, somewhere in that list, there's a version of me too?" That was the moment Daniel stopped being a victim and started becoming free. Because here is the truth Jung spent his whole life pointing toward. None of us is immune. At some point, in some season of pain, you may have been someone's vampire, someone's mask, someone's storm. We all carry a shadow. We all carry wounds. The single difference between the people who dismantle others and the people who don't comes down to one act of courage. The willingness to turn around and look inward instead of flinging that weight onto everyone else. Jung's entire path, individuation, was about exactly this: making the unconscious conscious. In your enemies, yes, but first, and most importantly, in yourself. This video was a mirror. And if you've made it all the way here, it means you're ready to see clearly, to name what's been draining you, and to step out of the hostage position for good. That is the first and most powerful form of freedom there is. It was never about blaming the 6 people on your list. It was about reclaiming sovereignty over your own mind. So now I want to invite you to do something that will lock this in. Write in the comments the name of the type that hit closest to home, and then, if you're brave enough, admit which one of these 6 might occasionally live inside you too. That confession, made in public, is the beginning of your awakening, and it might just free someone else who reads it. And if this video touched something in you, if some part of you woke up while you were listening, don't stop here. The next video continues this exact journey, and it goes even deeper into how you finally break these bonds for good. If you've made it this far, you already know you're not watching out of curiosity. You're here because something inside you has already begun to change. So keep going. You are not behind. You are just ahead of the people still asleep. And that, my friend, is frightening. But it is also the most liberating thing in the world. One last thing before you go. Which stamp are you adding to your mindset today? The stamp of sovereignty, of discernment, of self-awareness? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.